The Invisible Auditor, a corporate revenge story. They thought they could destroy me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The beginning of the end, 5 years. That's how long I had given to Meridian Financial Group. 5 years of 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and postponed vacations. 5 years of being the invisible force that kept their financial house in order. As a senior forensic accountant, I was the person they called when something didn't add up. I was their problem solver, their safety net. And then, just like that, I became their problem. It started with a quarterly audit of their offshore accounts. Standard procedure, nothing out of the ordinary. Until I noticed a pattern of transactions being routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, nothing that would raise red flags on a cursory review. But I wasn't doing a cursory review. These transactions all originated from the Executive Investment Fund, a pool of money that the C-suite used for strategic investments. The fund that CEO Marcus Klein had personal control over. I documented everything, triple-checked my findings, and scheduled a meeting with our CFO, Sarah Winters. She had always been my advocate, my mentor. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. "I appreciate your diligence, Alex," she said, taking the file from me. "I'll bring this up with Marcus personally." 2 days later, I was called into a conference room. Marcus Klein sat at the head of the table, flanked by Sarah and 2 company lawyers I'd never met. The head of HR stood by the door. "Alex, we've discovered some concerning irregularities in your expense reports," Marcus began, his voice ice cold. "We have reason to believe you've been embezzling company funds." My world collapsed in slow motion. They presented fabricated evidence, expense reports I'd never submitted, approvals I'd never given, offshore accounts I'd never opened. All meticulously forged to mirror the very fraud I had uncovered. "This is ridiculous," I protested. "I was just about to report." "We know exactly what you were about to report," Sarah interrupted, not meeting my eyes. "A clever attempt to deflect from your own activities." Within an hour, I was escorted out of the building by security, my personal belongings in a cardboard box, my access cards deactivated, my company phone wiped, my reputation destroyed. As I stood in the parking lot, watching the glass tower of Meridian Financial gleam in the sunlight, I made a silent promise. They took everything from me. So I decided to return the favor. The breaking point for 3 weeks, I barely left my apartment. My emails to former colleagues went unanswered. My phone calls were blocked. Meridian had effectively erased me, spreading rumors that I had attempted to embezzle millions. They were controlling the narrative. My severance was contested. My benefits were frozen. My industry contacts suddenly couldn't remember my name. I was drowning in a sea of mounting bills and diminishing options. Then came the final blow. A cease and desist letter from Meridian's legal team, threatening litigation if I continued to make defamatory claims against the company. I hadn't made any claims. I hadn't even spoken publicly. They were silencing me before I could even find my voice. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the legal document illuminated by the harsh overhead light. Something inside me shifted. The despair that had consumed me for weeks began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I was finished. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I knew their system better than they did. I knew where the bodies were buried. I knew the skeleton keys to their financial kingdom. And most importantly, I knew how to become invisible. The master plan, my first step, was to secure myself. I liquidated what investments I could, moved to a small apartment under a friend's name, and built a financial runway. 6 months. That's how long I gave myself to execute my plan. Next, I created a new identity. Not a fake person, but a financial ghost. A freelance auditor operating through a network of legitimate LLCs. Someone who could move through the financial world undetected, gathering information. Then, I mapped out Meridian's entire operation. Their legitimate businesses, their shell companies, their offshore accounts. I created a web of connections on my living room wall. Strings connecting photos, documents, and transaction records I'd memorized or secretly copied. A the center of it all, Marcus Klein and his private investment fund. But I needed more. I needed recent information, internal documents, access to their systems. For that, I needed an ally on the inside. I found her in Jamie Chen, a junior accountant I had mentored, someone who had watched my fall from grace with suspicious eyes, someone who had been passed over for promotion 3 times despite her brilliance. It took me 2 weeks to track her down outside of work, approaching her at a coffee shop she frequented. "I don't believe what they said about you," she admitted after I explained my situation. "The numbers they presented never added up." "They don't add up because they're fabricated," I replied. "But I need proof." Jamie became my eyes inside Meridian, feeding me information about the company's movements. Not enough to implicate her, just enough to give me direction. What a direction it was. The offshore account I discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Marcus Klein wasn't just skimming from the company investment fund. He was using it to manipulate stocks, bribe officials, and fund a lavish lifestyle that would make an oil baron blush. But he'd made one critical mistake. He trusted the wrong person to set up his financial labyrinth. Sarah Winters, my former mentor, the woman who had betrayed me. Sarah was brilliant at financial architecture, but terrible at covering her digital tracks. She used the same password conventions for everything, a pattern I had noticed during our years working together. A pattern that gave me the key to accessing her private cloud storage. There it was, the Holy Grail, a complete record of the parallel books she kept for Marcus's operations. Transactions, accounts, contacts, schedules, everything. Now I just needed to decide how to use it. The execution. I could have gone to the SEC immediately. I could have blown the whistle and watched Meridian burn. But that wouldn't be enough. I wanted Marcus and Sarah to feel what I felt. The slow, inexorable destruction of everything they had built. I started small, targeting one of Marcus's pet investments, a tech startup he had pumped millions of Meridian's money into. Using Sarah's records, I identified the weak points in the investment structure and anonymously tipped off a business journalist about potential irregularities. The resulting article wasn't a hit job. It was simply a series of pointed questions. But it was enough to spook other investors. The startup's next funding round faltered. The valuation dropped. Marcus had to pump in more Meridian money to keep it afloat. Strike one. Next, I focused on their client relationships. Meridian managed assets for several high-net-worth individuals, people who valued discretion above all else. Using a secure, anonymous email account, I sent 3 of their biggest clients just enough information to make them question Meridian's security protocols. I just thought you should know that your account information is being accessed by unauthorized personnel. Perhaps ask Meridian about their internal controls. Within weeks, 2 of the clients pulled their assets. A $500 million hit to Meridian's portfolio. Strike 2. But I was just warming up. The real target was Marcus's reputation, the thing he valued above all else. Using Sarah's records, I identified a pattern of suspicious trades around company announcements. Classic insider trading, but carefully disguised. I compiled the evidence and sent anonymous tips to both the SEC and the financial press. The investigation began quietly, but nothing stays quiet on Wall Street for long. Rumors spread. Meridian's stock price began to wobble. Analysts started asking questions on earnings calls that Marcus couldn't easily deflect. Through Jamie, I learned that the stress was getting to him. He was becoming paranoid, lashing out at executives, demanding witch hunts to find the leak. Sarah was feeling the heat too. She had been pulled into multiple closed-door meetings with the board, emerging pale and shaken. She knew what kind of records she had kept. She knew what could be exposed. But the coup de grace required patience. I needed to wait for their annual investor conference, Meridian's showcase event where they unveiled their strategy and celebrated their success. 3 days before the conference, I made my move. Using the access credentials Jamie had provided, I sent an email from Sarah's account to the company's auditors, expressing concerns about certain accounting practices and attaching selected documents from her secret records. Then I sent an anonymous email to every financial journalist in my contact list. Ask Marcus Klein about Cayman account number 4729-JX at tomorrow's investor conference. The numbers don't lie. I watched the live stream of the conference from my apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand. Marcus took the stage with his usual swagger, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead. The presentation went smoothly until the Q&A. A journalist from the Financial Times stood up. "Mr. Klein, could you comment on reports that the SEC is investigating Meridian for accounting irregularities related to offshore accounts, specifically Cayman account number 4729-JX?" The camera zoomed in on Marcus's face. For a split second, the mask slipped. Fear flashed in his eyes before he composed himself. "I'm not aware of any such investigation or account," he replied, voice steady. "Meridian maintains the highest standards of financial transparency and compliance." But the damage was done. The question hung in the air. Other journalists smelled blood, asking follow-up questions about regulatory compliance and internal controls. In the background, I could see Sarah frantically typing on her phone. She knew. She was trying to contain the damage. Too late. By market close, Meridian stock had dropped 15%. By the next morning, it was down 30%. The board called an emergency meeting and announced an internal investigation. 3 days later, trading of Meridian stock was halted. The SEC announced a formal investigation. Clients began a mass exodus. Within a week, Sarah Winters resigned to pursue other opportunities. Classic corporate euphemism for fired in disgrace. 2 weeks later, Marcus Klein was taking a leave of absence to cooperate with the ongoing investigation. I watched it all unfold from a distance, switching apartments every few weeks, maintaining my invisibility. Jamie kept me updated on the chaos inside. Forensic auditors crawling through every transaction, the executives turning on each other, the layoffs. The company I had once loved, that had once betrayed me, was imploding. But I wasn't done yet. As Meridian fought for survival, I prepared my endgame. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of everything I had discovered. Every fraudulent transaction, every manipulated statement, every bribe. I included Sarah's original records, communications between executives, and a detailed timeline of the fraud. Then, using a secure VPN, I sent the complete file to the SEC Enforcement Division, the Department of Justice, every major financial publication, Meridian's Board of Directors, Meridian's top 20 institutional investors. The subject line was simple: the truth about Meridian Financial Group. The email came from an account named The Invisible Auditor. The aftermath was spectacular. Meridian stock, which had partially recovered, crashed to penny stock levels. The board fired Marcus Klein. Federal agents raided Meridian's offices, carrying out boxes of documents. Sarah Winters cut a deal with prosecutors, agreeing to testify against Marcus in exchange for leniency. Marcus, facing multiple federal charges, released a statement blaming rogue employees for the irregularities. No one believed him. 6 months after my dismissal from Meridian, I sat in a small cafe watching the news on my laptop. Marcus Klein was doing the perp walk, escorted by federal agents into a courthouse, his face haggard and unshaven. Meridian Financial Group was being sold for parts, its legitimate assets acquired by competitors, its name forever tainted by scandal. As for me, I had moved on. Using my expertise in forensic accounting and my newfound understanding of corporate vulnerabilities, I started a consulting firm specializing in corporate ethics and compliance. My client list grew quietly through word of mouth. Businesses hired me to find their weaknesses before someone like me exploited them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I never publicly connected myself to Meridian's downfall. Never claimed credit for exposing their fraud. I didn't need to. I knew what I had done. They had thought they could silence me, erase me, make me disappear. Instead, I had become truly invisible, a silent force of justice in a system built on greed and deception. Did I profit from my revenge? Not directly. But I regained something more valuable than money. My power. Would I do it all again? In a heartbeat. Because here's the truth that Marcus Klein and Sarah Winters never understood. The system isn't as unbreakable as they think. The powerful aren't as untouchable as they believe. And sometimes, the person you underestimate the most is the one who knows exactly how to bring you down. Remember that the next time you decide to destroy someone who knows where all your financial bodies are buried. If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Like and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold in the corporate world. And remember, in the world of high finance, the most dangerous person isn't always the one in the corner office. Sometimes, it's the invisible auditor who knows all your secrets.